Hey YouTube, it's Zoe Tokyo, and now we're going to get back to more serious topics. Today I wanted to discuss or talk about European refugees and why they don't fit, why they have issues of assimilation and integration. Now, first, to the viewers, I really would like to break down what is a refugee, what is an immigrant, and what is a migrant, because a lot of times people use these terms interchangeably. And in real life, there's a lot of differences that put these people, or put us, because I'm an immigrant, um, that put us into distinct categories. So, first, is an immigrant is a person who leaves their country and moves to another one. They go through the proper procedures. They go to the immigration office or the embassy or what have you. They apply for a visa. They obtain a visa. They get a job. They pay taxes. Or whatever their financial situation is, unless they're rich or cared for or whatever. But basically, these are people who have visas, you know. Next is a migrant. A migrant is also a legal worker who comes from one country to another. Sometimes they're in a country seasonally, for a few months. They're there, they take up an odd job, and then they'll return back to their own country. Still, they have a visa, but they just have a limited time visa or a special visa. Actually, a migrant visa could be the same amount of time as other immigration visas. So, but they're still legitimate people. They're still people who help build an economy. Next, we're going to talk about a refugee, and that's a lot of what we're seeing. Well, actually, I mean, every country has this, especially Europe. Every country has immigrants, migrants, and refugees. Every country has them. However, refugees come with very little. They come from very poor countries. I also want to tack on asylum seekers to this as well. But there's a slight difference in those two. Refugees come from poor countries, and a lot of times they seek to enter into university, but they are seeking shelter or they are seeking to live in a new country. Sometimes refugees come illegally, or sometimes, well, if they're an asylum seeker, they've actually gone through the proper channels and they actually have a visa, a special visa. A lot of times, a country will give them special housing if they're an asylum seeker. They'll have certain benefits as an asylum seeker. And this is worked out from one country or one government to another, as a help or part of a treaty or something like that, part of an immigration agreement between different countries. And I actually want to say that this is worked out somewhere around the lines of, you know, when they determine how long certain people from certain countries can enter into certain countries, that this is kind of worked out around that time. But asylum seekers are legitimate people too. They have visas. The thing of it is that they're just getting help from that country. But it could be 5 years, it could be 2 years. They can actually pay into the system, get a job, and become, a viable person in society in that foreign country. So, you kind of want to be careful with asylums, and how you look at them, because they can escape a bad situation and come with nothing. But they can actually become the next scientist. They can actually become, a success story. So you kind of want to be careful about, having disdain for asylum seekers. Refugees, on the other hand, they tend to come with their families. They tend to come with very little. They come with um, just I almost want to say an open hand. Um, but their intention is to flee and to kind of find food and find shelter and find money and to live. Now, but the differences between all of these people, immigrants, migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, is the mentality that they have. Immigrants plan to assimilate or at least integrate. And I'm going to break that down. What that is assimilation and integration. Assimilation is when you move to a country and you take on most of the customs of that country, the language, the way they eat, the diet, the pastimes, the way that they drink, how they behave socially. You take on their mannerisms. When you integrate into a country, you're still yourself, but you'll probably learn the language and you'll partake in a few of the customs, but not all of them. You'll take on the ones that you're interested in taking on, and you'll live in that country. Of course, you abide by the rules, but you don't totally. I almost want to say you don't totally lose yourself, or you don't completely 1,000% adapt to a foreign country. Some people are too old to completely adapt to a foreign country. Some people are too individualistic, like me. Every country I've lived in, I've looked like this. I've worn all black. I've been, alternative. So I always stood out, but I always integrated. I made an effort to learn the language if I was staying there, if I was getting a visa. Um, I paid rent if I worked in that country. I don't know, that's a long story, but I've always had a visa and I've always went through things the right way. And like I said, I made an attempt to learn the language, so I tried to assimilate as much as I could while I lived in that particular country. Um, Now back to refugees. Refugees are on the different end of the spectrum is because they're there specifically because they need help. Um, they're not necessarily interested in assimilating. They're not interested in really adapting to where they are. So you'll notice that where refugees live, it mirrors it mirrors exactly where they came from. So if they came from like something that looks like a war, a bomb went off. If they're moving to a city or a country that could be very modern, eventually over time where they're living is going to mirror exactly what they've left, exactly the environment that they've left, because their mentalities are pretty much locked. Their mentalities are pretty much locked. Now, this isn't 100% because you have to allow space for success stories in all of this. You have to, there are immigrants who do the wrong thing in countries. There are migrants who overstay their visas. There are exceptions, negative and positive, to all of this. So you have to make room for that. But and refugees too. There are refugees who learn the language but with them, it's much more difficult for them to adapt. And you'll see that they can speak the language fluently. When I was in Europe, I came across refugees who, they spoke German and they spoke this and that, or Austrian, or, Italian. However, they were still 1,000% of their country. Their idea of assimilation was the fact that they were there in that country and that they spoke the language. They weren't going to sit down and have bratwurst with you. They weren't going to sit down and eat a schnitzel or drink a pint with you. They're not there for that. They're there to create the life that they once had in a better environment, and they're there to um, live their life. Now, what does this have to do? All of this have to do with Europe, and this was very important. This is very important information because it gives us the groundwork and the framework for what's going on in Europe now. As far as Europe, you have people who, like I said, are not really interested in assimilating, and that's the whole entire issue. Because if all of these people who were coming in were looking to get jobs or build jobs, you'd have a different Europe. There would be no complaints. You would have situations where Swedes are, the economy is booming, that these people are hiring Swedes, that these people are hiring Germans, that these people are. Instead, you just have people who are kind of off to the side who are not really interested or may even be fearful in going out into main society and mixing, so to speak, with natives. And when you have this type of fear, it it creates it can be felt because this type of mentality has a physical manifestation. People pick up the behavior, and they tend to exile themselves. They tend to hide from other people. They stick with their own. They're not necessarily polite to the host country. They may be rude. They may just kind of use the host country and feel as if they have a right to be there, and that's what we're seeing now in Germany and all these other European countries. Now, what Europe is going to have to do to reverse the situation, that's another video. As we all, that's just another video. But what we're talking about here is why the refugees don't fit. If it's one thing to say, well, they're fighting us, they're doing this, they're doing that, but you have to question why they're doing that. What is the mentality of these people? Where you can just say, well, they're from the East. Everyone who comes from the East, there are Arabs who come from the East, and they're richer than fucking dirt. I mean, and they're not behaving like this. Yeah, they're a bit, they know that they've got it going on because, they own a hell of a lot, but they're not behaving like this, is what I'm trying to say. They're doing business with your government leaders. They're doing big business with your government leaders. They're not going down to the pub or the Shangri-La and beating up people. You know what I'm saying? And they're from the East. So you kind of have to, you need to get into the mindset of the people who are around you, these new people, these refugees, and you need to kind of understand where these people come from, what is their situation, what is their thinking. And this is pretty much what I've described in this video. This is their thinking. They're coming with an open hand, and they're not there to fit with you. That's not their purpose. Um, that's not the goal. The goal is to get food, shelter, and water. And whatever they dealt with back in their home country, they're going to bring it to your country. So if you thought that this was going to be a peaceful exchange, a peaceful open doors, it's impossible because even the ones that I've met in Europe, they need psychological counseling. And I'll do another video on that. And that's not to say that in a disparaging manner. But a lot of these people need psychological help before they can assimilate into into any type of Western society. Because if you are, and we're not, you can say, oh, the media hypes this up. Actually, no. We know things go on in Turkey. We know things are going on in all of these countries right now. We know that. So if you're escaping this, if you're dealing with this, if you're actually in this type of dangerous environment, this shapes your mind. This affects your mentality of the world, of people. It doesn't matter where you are physically. The mind has a grip on that type of, those type of events, those types of things that are happening. And that's what you're dealing with. They may, yes, they know that they're physically in a different part, but if something goes down, if a bomb is dropped on Bavaria, these people will be able to probably uh, deal with it better than you because they're still in that frame of mind. You understand what I'm saying? They're still in that frame of mind of being in that environment, and this is what you all need to address. Germany and Sweden and all of this, giving them language lessons and giving them a place to stay, that's nothing but a Band-Aid. You've done nothing but put a Band-Aid on these people. You need to give counseling and talk to these people and ask them what they've been through. What are their goals? What do they hope to do in this country? And you need to heal a lot of wounds. Now, that's a lot of work, and that's not your responsibility as Europeans to do this. And it's a lot of work, but this is what must be done in order to have a peaceful and assimilated Europe so that you can have Europe 10 years ago. Otherwise, you forget it. Otherwise, you can forget it. Because what you all are dealing with is a mentality. You're fighting against a mentality, a type of mind. So I'm going to end this video now. And if you guys want a part 2 to this, just leave me a comment, rate, and subscribe. Tell me about your experiences. But this is basically what Europe is dealing with. They're fighting against a mentality before an ideology. A mentality and an ideology are two different things, but Europe is fighting against a mentality. So thank you for watching. Comment, rate, and subscribe.